Good evening, and welcome back to the Sleepy Archive. Tonight, there is nothing you need to do. You don't need to remember the names. You don't need to follow every turn. This is history told slowly, the kind you are allowed to fall asleep to. So settle in. Let your shoulders sink into the bed. Let the day go quiet, and let your breathing slow. Tonight, we are going back some 700 years into the small lanes and lamplit cottages of a medieval English village to ask a quiet, ordinary question. How did people back then ever find one another? How did a girl and a boy in a village of 200 souls fall into the slow business of courting and promising and marrying? There were no letters for most of them, no portraits, no long journeys to meet a stranger, only the same faces, year after year, around the same fields and fires, and yet, somehow, out of all that sameness, matches were made. We are not going to rush. We will sit by the hearth, and at the church door, and on the worn green where the young people danced, and we will let the whole slow season of it pass by the way it really did. If you drift off somewhere in the middle, good. That is the whole idea. The archive will keep reading, whether you are listening or not. So whenever you are ready, close your eyes. Let your thoughts come loose. Let's begin. Imagine a small village in the green low country of England in the year 1340. It has no name you would know. A scatter of low cottages with walls of mud and woven sticks, roofs of grey thatch gone soft with moss, and thin blue wood smoke leaning into a still evening sky. Around it lie the open fields, striped into long narrow lands, and beyond them the dark edge of the wood, and a stream, and a stone church no taller than a barn, with a squat square tower. That is the whole world for nearly everyone born here. Most of them will live their lives within an hour's walk of that tower, and most will die within sight of it. 200 people, more or less. You would know every single one of them by their walk, by their voice in the dark, by the smell of their fire. You would know whose cow that was, lowing across the dusk, and whose child was crying behind which wall. Think about that for a moment as you lie there. Not 200 strangers, 200 people you have known your whole life. The boy you might one day marry, you have very likely seen him every day since you could walk. You played in the same mud. You sat through the same long sermons. There is no meeting a stranger across a crowded room here. There is only the slow, patient sorting of people you have always known. The light is going now. A woman calls a name across the lane, and somewhere a door is pulled shut. The fields go from green to grey to black, and the only brightness left is the low red eye of a fire through an open doorway. This is the world we will spend the night in. Let it settle around you, soft and dim and close. In our own time, we think of love as a private thing. Two people, a feeling, a choice that belongs to no one but them. In the medieval village, it was almost the opposite. A marriage was the business of the whole community, and everybody felt entitled to an opinion. A match was not only two hearts, it was two strips of land brought side by side, two families joined for good or ill, a new household that would owe rent to the same lord, and tithes to the same church, and a share of work to the same harvest. When a couple married, the village itself was rearranged just a little, so the old people watched. The mothers compared, around the well and over the wash, who was steady and who was idle, whose family kept a good pig, whose daughter could spin a fine thread, whose son did not drink. A great deal of courting happened in the talk of women who were not courting anyone at all, and the Lord watched too, in his way, which we will come to. For now, only understand this. The young man walking a girl home from the fields was not walking alone with her in any real sense. A dozen unseen eyes marked the two of them go, and by morning half the village would know it, and be turning it over. It sounds suffocating, perhaps, to us, but there was a kind of safety in it as well. You were never quite lost. You were never quite a secret. The same web that hemmed you in also held you up. And on a cold night, with the wind in the thatch, being held by something larger than yourself was not the worst way to live. There is a thing people often believe about the Middle Ages, that everyone married as children, that little girls of 12 were handed to grown men. For kings and great lords with crowns and lands to bargain, that could be true. But for the ordinary village folk we are sitting among tonight, it was not. Most peasants married late, by the old reckoning. The men, often in their middle or late 20s, the women in their early 20s. And the reason was simple, and very practical, and not romantic at all. You could not marry until you could feed a household. A young man needed land to work, or a trade, or a holding of his own, and that often meant waiting for a father to step back, waiting to save enough, waiting for a cottage to fall empty in the lane. A young woman, very often, would spend years in service first, sleeping in another family's house, learning to brew and bake and keep a dairy, putting by what little she could toward the day she would have a home to run. So courtship was not a thing of children. It was a thing of grown men and women who had already worked hard for years, who knew exactly what a household cost and what a poor match could do to a life. They were not dreamy. They could not afford to be. And yet, even the most practical heart is still a heart. A careful young woman counting her linen could still feel it lift when a certain voice said her name across the field. The waiting only made the wanting quieter and longer and deeper. That is worth remembering as the dark comes down. To understand courting, you have to understand the year. A medieval village did not run on weeks and clocks. It ran on the slow wheel of the seasons, and that wheel decided, as much as anything, when love had room to happen. In the deep of winter, the world drew in. Short grey days, long black nights, the ground iron-hard or churned to freezing mud. People stayed close to their own fires. There was mending and spinning and waiting. Little happened and little could. The village seemed almost to sleep the way you are beginning to. Then spring loosened it. The fields needed every hand. Ploughing, sowing, the lambs coming, men and women working the long lands side by side under a widening sky. Work through the young together. A shared furrow, a shared weariness, a shared cup of small ale at noon. Summer was the green tide of it. Haymaking? Then the harvest, the busiest and most crowded weeks of the whole year, when even outsiders came to help bring the corn in, and the evenings were warm and long and full of tired, laughing people. This was the high season of meeting, the season of the dance on the green, and autumn brought the weddings. After the harvest was safely in, when there was grain in the loft and a little money in the purse, the betrothals of summer ripened into marriages before the cold shut the world down again. Round and round the wheel turned, year after year, and the lives of the young turned with it, patient and certain and slow. Let us put a face to it now, the way the old storytellers would. There is a young woman in this village. We will call her Edith. She is 20, with reddened hands and a quiet way, and she has spent the last 3 years in service at a larger farm 2 lanes over. And there is a young man, call him Hal, a few years older, lean and sunburned, working his father's land and waiting, the way young men wait, for the day a holding of his own might come free. They have known each other, in the way everyone here knows everyone, since they were small. But knowing someone all your life is not the same as seeing them. And one ordinary day, at the haymaking, something simply shifts. She is raking the cut grass into rows. He is pitching it up onto the cart. The sun is low and gold, the air thick with the green smell of it, and for no reason she could ever name, she looks up, and he is already looking. Nothing is said. Nothing could be said with a dozen people in the field. He goes back to his fork. She goes back to her rake. But something has been noticed on both sides, and noticed that it was noticed. That is how it began most of the time. Not with words, not with a bold approach, with a single long look across the cut hay, and a warmth in the chest that has nothing to do with the summer sun. We will follow these two, on and off, through the night. For now, let them simply have seen each other. It is enough. In a world with no cafes, no dances you could buy a ticket for, no way at all to be alone together in private, it was work that did the work of courting. The shared labour of the village threw young people side by side, hour after hour, in the only company that was allowed, and respectable, and free. Think of the harvest field again. Men and women working down the same long land, the reapers and the binders, close enough to talk low under the rhythm of the work, to pass a jug, to brush hands reaching for the same sheaf, and to apologize, and to not quite mean it. Or the gleaning after, when the poor women and children went over the stubble, gathering the last fallen grain, slow, bent work with plenty of time for talk, or threshing in the barn through autumn, the dust hanging gold in the doorlight, flails rising and falling, voices and laughter in the warm fug of it. Even fetching water was a kind of meeting place. The well, the stream, the village pump. Wherever women gathered with their pails, news travelled, and so did glances, and a young man with no real reason to be there might find a reason, and linger, and be teased for it. None of this looks like romance to us. There were no flowers, no fine words, no candlelit table. There was sweat, and chaff in the hair, and aching backs, and the smell of the byre. But within all that ordinary toil, the oldest thing in the world was quietly happening, the way it always has, and always will. Two people finding reasons to be near each other. That was the courtship. The work was only the excuse. When a village family thought about a match, they did not think first of love. They thought, with great care, about whether it would work, whether the two could build a household that would not sink in the first hard year. Love, they hoped, would come, but a household had to be planned. A good match meant balance. A young man with a holding of land wanted a young woman who could run a household well, who could brew and bake and keep a garden and a dairy, mend and spin and bear the work. And she and her family wanted a man who was steady, who was not cruel, who would not waste what they had. It meant the right standing too. A family with a good holding did not want their daughter marrying a landless labourer, nor their son tied to a girl with nothing to bring. People married, by and large, within their own rank in the village. The substantial families together, the poorer ones together, the world quietly sorting itself. And it meant what each could bring to the door. Her family might give her linens, a cooking pot, a few coins, a cow, some hens, the goods that would furnish a new home. His family might settle land or a cottage on him. These were not gifts. They were the foundation, counted and remembered. It can sound cold, laid out like that. But think of it as care rather than calculation. These were people who had seen what hunger did, and what a bad winter did, and they loved their children too much to send them into a marriage that would starve. The romance, when it came, would have to live inside those walls, and often enough, it learned to. So the beginning of a medieval courtship was a slow and quiet thing. A look noticed, a name spoken a little too carefully, a young man finding reasons to pass a certain door, a girl who is not surprised that he does, nothing declared, nothing yet that anyone could point to. It might go on like that for a whole season, or longer. A summer of glances, an autumn of small kindnesses, a hand given over a stile, a place kept on the bench at a feast, a few words at the well that meant more than they said. Everyone would know, no one would say. And all the while, on both sides, the families would be watching and weighing. Is he steady? Is she able? Will the lands lie well together? Could this become a marriage when the time and the money came right? The young people felt the warmth. The old people did the arithmetic. Both were part of the same patient thing. Let the picture hold there for a moment before we move on. The low green country, the striped fields, the squat church tower. 200 people who have known each other all their lives. And, somewhere among them, two who have just begun to look. The fire has burned down a little while we talked. The village is quieter now. The first stars are out over the thatch. Rest here. We are in no hurry at all. If the village was where courtship slowly grew, there were certain places where it caught light. For all the watching and the work, young people still found their moments, their gathering grounds, where being young and being seen was the whole point. Tonight, in this next slow stretch, we will visit them, one by one. The first and greatest was the green. Every village had a worn patch of common grass near the church or the cross, where the geese were grazed, and the markets stood, and the whole place gathered on holy days. On a feast evening, with the work laid down, this was the heart of the young world. Then there was the church itself, and the churchyard around it, not only for prayer. Before there were halls or meeting houses, the nave of the church and the yard among the graves were where the village simply met to talk, to trade, to settle things, and to look sidelong at one another. There was the fair when it came, and the alehouse with its low warm room, and the work gatherings of autumn, and, woven through all of them, the dancing. We will take them slowly. There is no rush to arrive. For now, simply picture the green at dusk on a holy day in summer. The light gone gold and long, the grass trodden soft, voices, and somewhere a pipe being tuned, and the smell of crushed grass and wood smoke. The young of the village drifting toward it, in their second best clothes, as they have drifted toward it for 100 summers. Let us drift there too. Of all the ways the young came together, none mattered more than the dance. On feast days and holy days, when the church gave them rest from work, the green filled with music, and the dancing began, and it could go on until the light was gone. The music was simple and old. A pipe, a tabor drum, perhaps a fiddle, or a man who could sing a long way, and under it all, the steady stamp and clap of the dancers themselves keeping time. You did not need fine instruments. You needed feet and breath and others to dance with. And the dancers were not the stiff, separated things of the great hall. These were the round dances, the carols, where people joined hands in a ring or a long chain and wound around the green, singing the verses together, turning and turning. Hands were held. Hands were passed from one to the next, a whole village linked and moving. For young people watched all year, this was a rare gift. A girl's hand in a boy's hand, openly, with everyone's blessing, because it was only the dance, the brush of shoulders, the breathlessness, the chance to be beside someone, and to laugh, and to have it all mean nothing or everything, under cover of the music. The priests, it must be said, were not always pleased. They grumbled about dancing in the churchyard, about songs that were not hymns, about young bodies turning too close together in the long summer dusk. But the dancing went on. It always went on. It was far too old and far too necessary for any sermon to stop. And on the green, in the gold light, Edith and Hal might at last have danced. We think of a medieval church as a place of silence and prayer. It was that, but it was also, strange as it sounds, the village's great meeting hall, the one large, dry, shared roof that everyone owned and everyone came under. The nave, the long body of the church, was often almost bare. No fixed pews, no rows of seats. An open stone floor where people stood and shifted and murmured. Before and after the Mass, and on the long saints' days, it was a place to gather and to talk, and yes, to glance across the crowd at a particular face standing among the others. And the porch, the covered doorway at the church's side, was busier still. This was where worldly business was done under the holy roof. Bargains were struck there. Oaths were sworn. News was passed. And, as we will see, it was on the church porch that marriages themselves were made. So the young, dressed in their best for the holy day, came not only to worship. They came to be among everyone. A girl would know exactly where a certain young man liked to stand. He would know which door she came in by. A look held a heartbeat too long across the dim stone space could carry a great deal. Picture it now, as the bell stills. The cool dark inside, thick with the smell of cold stone and tallow and crowded wool. The coloured light from one small window falling on the heads of people who have known each other forever. Among all that murmuring, two of them are not quite listening to the priest, and God, one hopes, did not mind too much. Once or twice a year, if they were lucky, the wider world came to them in the shape of a fair. A market town nearby, or a great abbey, would hold a fair on its saint's day, and from all the villages around, people would walk in for it, in their hundreds. For a young person who had seen the same faces every day of their life, a fair was something close to wonder. Stalls of cloth and ribbons and pins and spices. A man with a dancing bear, perhaps. A juggler. A seller of pies whose smell carried halfway across the field. Noise and colour and crowds and faces you had never seen before. And there it was, the rare and thrilling thing. New faces. Young men and women from other villages, other valleys. People you were not related to, people whose whole history you did not already know by heart. At a fair, a marriage might be made between villages, and a girl might leave with a man from a place she had only ever heard, named. The little gifts of the fair carried weight too. A young man might buy a girl a ribbon, or a pin, or a sweet cake, and in the buying and the giving, a great deal was understood that was never spoken. A fairing, such a gift was called. A token brought back from the fair. To accept one was to accept something more than the gift. Then the fair ended, and the long walk home began in the dusk. Tired feet, and a head full of more than it had held that morning. A ribbon in a pocket, a face remembered. And the Smalls' grey village, when it came back into view, looking just a little smaller than before. Closer to home, there was the alehouse, not the grand inn of the high road, with beds for travellers, but the village's own, often only a cottage where a woman brewed good ale and hung a green bush over her door to say a fresh batch was ready, and the neighbours came to drink it. It was warm and dim and close. A fire in the hearth, a few benches and a trestle, the low murmur of familiar voices, the smell of ale and wood smoke and damp wool steaming gently as it dried. After the work was done, this was where the men of the village mostly gathered. It was not, in truth, a great courting ground for respectable young women. A girl's good name was a fragile and precious thing, and a young woman who spent her evenings in the alehouse risked it being whispered about. The drinking and the company belonged mostly to the men, but it played its part all the same. It was where a young man's character was on show. Was he a steady drinker or a foolish one, generous or mean, a quiet sort or one who started fights when the ale was in him? The fathers of daughters noticed these things. They drank in the same room, and on a feast night, with whole families about, the line softened. A betrothal might be sealed there with a shared cup, the bride ale, that gave us the word bridal. Picture the low gold room, the fire sinking, the talk grown slow and warm. Somewhere a match is being quietly approved over the rims of 2 wooden cups. Let the warmth of that room settle over you now. We should remember, too, that not every young person stayed in the village to be courted. Many left it for years, not forever, but for a season of their lives, to go into service. And service moved them and mixed them in ways the home lane never could. A great many young people, both girls and boys, spent their teens and 20s living and working in another household. A farmer's daughter might serve in a larger farm, or a town merchant's house. A young man might work as a servant in husbandry, hired by the year at the autumn fair. This took them out among new people. New villages, new towns, new fellow servants sleeping under the same wide roof, new masters and mistresses who, like the village before them, watched and judged and matched. Service was a school for marriage. You learned the work you would one day do in your own home, and it was where many couples truly met. 2 servants in the same household or in neighbouring ones, thrown together by the work, falling slowly into the same old story over the byre and the bread oven. By the time they had saved enough to marry, they had often known each other for years. So, the village was not quite the closed world it first seemed. Its young people went out, like seeds on the wind, and many drifted home again, and some did not, and married where they had landed. The lanes you grew up in were not always the lanes you would grow old in. For some, courtship was the road that led them away. Rest a moment in that thought. Between the dancing and the marrying lay a long, slow middle, the season of small gifts. For a courtship to move from glances to something settled, a couple had to begin, quietly, to give each other things. And the things they gave carried meaning. A gift was a kind of promise, made with the hands instead of the mouth. To give was to declare an intention. To accept was to admit you welcomed it. And so the giving and accepting of even small things was done carefully and watched closely, because everyone knew what it meant. The gifts themselves were humble. A ribbon, as we said. A pair of gloves, which carried a special weight as a courting gift. A worked purse, sewn by a girl's own hands. A knife, or a pin, or a little brooch. A coin bent in half, kept as a token. A pair of knitted things against the winter. And there were the things made, not bought, which meant the most. A young man good with his hands might carve something small and useful and patient. A spoon, a comb, a little box, worked it over many winter evenings. Every cut of the knife, a quiet hour spent thinking of one person. To us, a wooden spoon is nothing. But imagine receiving one, knowing the days of work in it, knowing what it was not allowed to say. The whole of a feeling, pressed into a thing you could hold and keep in a chest. That was how they spoke, when speaking plainly was not yet allowed. Let that quiet exchange of small things drift through your mind as the night deepens. And then, at last, came the open part of it, what later ages would call walking out. The moment when a courtship stopped being a thing of glances and tokens, and became a thing the couple did together, in the half sight of everyone, without yet being promised. It might be a walk home from the fields in the long summer dusk. A young man falling into step beside a girl on the lane, carrying her bundle, the two of them talking low, slowing their feet, making the short way home longer. Everyone saw. That was the point. To be seen together was to declare it. It might be sitting together at a feast on the green, or him waiting, not quite by accident, where she would pass with her pail, or the two of them lingering after the dance, when the others had drifted off, talking in the blue dark at the edge of the firelight. There was a careful, unspoken law to all of it. They were rarely truly alone. A younger sister might trail along. The lane was never empty for long. A girl's good name was guarded by the simple fact that there was almost nowhere to be unseen. The courtship happened in plain view, and the watching itself kept it honest. But within those bounds, the warmth was real. Two people walking slowly in the gold-going light with the whole village around them, and, for a little while, entirely alone in the only way that mattered. The fields breathing out the day's heat. A hand, perhaps, found and held. Hold that image gently. We will leave the green now and turn toward the deeper night. We have watched the young people meet. Now let us sit with how they spoke, not in words, for words came late and carefully, but in all the small signs that a whole village understood without anyone ever teaching them. So much of medieval courtship was a language of gesture. Where you stood, who you stood beside, whether you turned towards someone or away, a glance held or dropped, a place left open on a bench or quietly filled. A village read these things as easily as we read print, and far more closely. To accept a gift, as we said, was to answer a question never spoken aloud. To give back a token of your own was to say yes again, and louder. To return a gift unopened, or to give nothing back at all, was a gentle and unmistakable no, and both sides understood it, and no one had to be shamed by plain words. There were old customs woven through it, half game, half magic. Girls who slipped a sprig of some herb under a pillow to dream of who they would wed. Charms said over a candle. Apples peeled in one long ribbon and thrown to read a letter in the fall. The church frowned, and the customs went on anyway, harmless and hopeful in the dark. This was a world, remember, where most could not read or write. There were no love letters for the common folk, no notes passed in secret. The feeling had to live entirely in things you could see and do and give. A spoken language of objects and glances and small brave acts. It was slower than ours. It may also have been clearer. Let it move quietly through you now. Of all the courting gifts, a few carried weight beyond the rest, and the strangest, to us, was gloves. Across medieval and later England, gloves were the great gift of love and promise, given at courtship and at weddings, far past what their simple use would explain. Why gloves? Partly because they were costly enough to mean something, yet small enough to give. Partly because they touched the hands, and the hands were what would one day be joined. And partly for the old reason that some things simply become tokens, and everyone agrees they have. A young man who gave a girl a fine pair of gloves was saying a great deal, that he could afford them, that he had thought of her hands, that his intentions were not idle, and if she wore them where he and others could see, she was giving her answer to the whole street. There were gloves at the wedding too, given out to the guests as remembrances, so that long after, a worn pair in a chest could carry back a whole day. A small soft thing, shaped to a hand that was no longer young, the way a smell can. It is a tender detail to sit with, that in a hard world of mud and labour and counting, people still reached for small, soft, beautiful things to say the soft, beautiful thing they could not say aloud. A pair of gloves given in a doorway in a country 700 years gone. Let it rest there, warm and small, while the fire sinks a little lower. There were other tokens, each with its own quiet grammar. A knife, oddly to us, was a common gift between lovers, a good blade in a worked sheath, useful every day, and a thing a person kept and carried. To carry your sweetheart's knife at your belt was to carry them about with you, all day long. A purse was a woman's gift to give. soon, and embroidered by her own hands through the long evenings, small and fine and full of the hours she had spent on it, given to a young man to hang at his belt, where the world could see he was spoken for. And there was the bent coin, a silver penny bent in half between strong fingers or with a little force, and given as a love token, a thing made deliberately useless as money, so that it could only ever be kept, and never spent, and never mean anything but the giving. Two halves of a thing were always powerful. A coin broken between two people, each keeping a half, a token cut in two. The promise that the halves, like the two of them, were meant to come together again. You can almost feel how it would sit in a palm, that little broken weight of meaning. None of these things were grand. A blade, a sewn purse, a ruined penny. Things a poor person could just manage. But each was chosen and given and kept and understood. The whole great feeling of a life folded down into something small enough to close your hand around. Close your hand, now, in the dark. Let it be light and quiet. We go on. There was a custom in some places and some times that surprises people now. It went by the name of bundling in later centuries, and older forms of it ran back a long way, and it allowed a courting couple to do something otherwise unthinkable, to spend a night side by side. The cold is part of the reason. In a small cottage, with one fire and few candles, where light and warmth were dear, a young man courting a girl might be allowed to stay the night rather than walk home in the dark and cold. And theirs was, in truth, often only one warm place to be: the bed. So, in the houses where it was practiced, the couple would lie down together, but bound or bordered or wrapped apart. Sometimes a long bolster laid down the middle of the bed. Sometimes the girl sewn into a bundling sack, or each wrapped separately in the blankets, close enough to talk all night, kept apart by cloth and custom and the thin walls of a watching house. The point was to let them be near, and to test the nearness while holding the line. They could talk in the dark, hour after hour, as lovers most want to learn each other's voices, each other's minds, the slow, true shape of a person. And the family slept a curtain away, and the customs of the village did the guarding. It sounds strange to us, and it was much argued over even then. But picture only the gentlest part of it. Two young people in the deep cold dark, heads close on one pillow, talking low and long about everything and nothing, while the fire ticks and settles. That, at least, is an image to drift toward. Let your own breathing slow to match theirs. Now we come to a thing that shaped a great many medieval lives, and a great many medieval quarrels. For in this world, a marriage did not strictly need a priest, or a church, or a witness at all. It needed only the two people and the right words, freely said. This was the law of the church itself, and it was clear. If a man and a woman, both free to wed, exchanged words of consent in the present, I take you as my husband, I take you as my wife, then they were married, truly married, in the eyes of God and the law, By those words alone. You can imagine what that opened. A young couple, courting against their family's wishes, alone for once in a barn or a lane, might simply say the words to each other and be wed, and no power on earth could unmake it. No banns, no priest, no feast, a marriage made in a whisper, in the dark. But there was the danger of it too. Said in private, with no one to witness, such a marriage could later be denied. A man might say the words to win a girl, and afterwards swear he never had. And then there was nothing but her word against his, and a tangle for the church courts to unpick. So the church begged people, again and again, not to do it this way, to come to the church door, to say the words in the open before witnesses with the banns read first. Not because the private vow was invalid, it was valid, and that was the whole problem. But because a marriage no one had seen was a marriage that could break a life. We will go to that church door soon. For now, rest in the strange power of a few quiet words. Let us return to our two, who we left looking across the hay. A season has passed for them while we talked of gloves and bent coins and whispered vows. By now the village knows. By now they are walking out. It happened the slow way, as it should. A fairing brought back for her one autumn, a length of green ribbon which she wore, a purse she sewed for him through the winter, which he hung at his belt where men could see it. And then the evenings, the lingering walks, the place kept beside her on the feast day bench. Hal has spoken to his father, and Edith to her mother, and the families have begun to talk. The lands lie well enough together. He is steady. She is able. A cottage in the lane has an old man in it, who will not see another winter. The hard arithmetic goes. And when it falls empty, there might be a holding for a young couple to take. So they wait the way the young always waited. Through the ploughing and the sowing, through another green tide of summer, their courtship now open and accepted and almost ordinary, only not quite promised. Everyone expects it. Everyone is waiting for the same cottage, the same autumn, the same words. And on a warm dusk, walking back from the fields, he carries her rake as well as his fork. They do not say much. There is not much left that needs saying. The whole long patient thing is nearly ripe. Let them walk. The light is gold and going. We will let them reach the gate in their own time. It would be a soft and false picture if we pretended it always ran smooth. For all the watching and the custom, courtships broke. Promises were given and taken back. Hearts, then as now, were not always honest and not always brave. A young man might court a girl through a whole season, and then a better match would be dangled before him. More land, a richer purse, and the families would lean, and he would go where the land was, and the girl would be left. It was common enough that the songs are full of it. There were the false promises, the words said only to get what should have waited. A girl who believed she was as good as married, on a whispered vow in the dark, and found, when it mattered, that the man would not say the words again, where others could hear. The church courts heard these cases endlessly, the said and the unsaid, the he promised and he denied. And there was the plain grief of a match forbidden. Two who wanted each other, and families who would not have it, and no power in a poor young person's hands to go against the whole weight of kin and custom and land. Some defied it and ran to the church door or said the secret words. Most, in the end, did not. We do not have their names, most of them. Only the worn shapes of their sorrows, in court rolls and old ballads, the same sorrows we would know in a moment if we met them. The Middle Ages were a long time ago. The breaking of a heart was exactly the same. Let that gentle, old sadness pass through you and out, the way a cloud crosses the moon. Before we go on to priests and law and weddings, let the world go still again. We have come through the meeting and the courting, the tokens and the dark close talk, the things that held and the things that broke. Now, there is a hush before the promise. Think of a courting couple near the end of the long waiting on an autumn night. The harvest is in. The arithmetic has come right. The cottage in the lane has fallen empty. Everything that had to be settled is nearly settled. There is only the saying of it left to do. There is a particular peace in that, even across 700 years. The waiting almost done, the long uncertain season of glances behind them. Ahead, a known thing, a home, a hearth, a life shaped like the lives of everyone they love. Not a wild romance. A safe and ordinary harbour reached after a long, slow sail. The village settles around them into the dark. The fires bank low. The animals shift in the byres. The church tower stands black against the stars. 200 souls, and among them two who have almost arrived. Let the fire in your own room sync with theirs. There is nothing left tonight that needs deciding, for them or for you. The promise will keep until morning. And the next part of the story, the church door and the words said in the light, will be there waiting whenever you are. Rest now. Now we come to the great shaping power over all of it, the church. For courtship was the village's business, but marriage, in the end, was the church's. And the church had thought longer and harder about marriage than about almost anything else. By the high Middle Ages, the church had settled what a marriage was. Not a thing the Lord made, or the Father made, or even the priest made. A marriage was made by the two people themselves, by their own free consent. The priest blessed it. The witnesses confirmed it. But the couple made it. This was a remarkable idea, and we should not pass it by too quickly. In a world built on rank and land, and the will of fathers and lords, the church held firmly that no one could be forced to marry against their will. Consent had to be free. A marriage made by force was no marriage at all. It did not always work, of course. Pressure is not the same as force, and families had 1,000 ways to lean on the young. But the principle was there, written into the law of the church, and people knew it. A girl truly set against a match had, in the consent, a stone she could plant her feet on. So the church stood over the whole business, like the church tower over the village. It said when you could marry, and whom, and how, and what the words must be. It turned the slow private courtship of the green and the lane into something fixed, and witnessed, and blessed. Let us walk slowly toward its door. The church had rules about whom you could not marry, and they were stricter than ours. These were the forbidden degrees, the lines of blood and kinship and even friendship across which a marriage was not allowed and would be undone if discovered. You could not marry close kin, of course, as in any age. But the medieval church drew the circle very wide, out to third and fourth cousins, counting relationships most of us would never trouble to trace. In a small village where everyone was related to everyone somehow, this mattered a great deal. And it went further into kinds of kin we no longer reckon at all. There was kinship by marriage. Your dead wife's sister might be forbidden to you. And there was spiritual kinship. Your godparents and their children and your own godchildren all counted as family you could not wed. The bonds of the soul the church held were as real as blood. In a closed village, this could tie the young in knots. The boy you fancied might be your second cousin or your godmother's son, and so closed to you. The pool of those you could lawfully marry was smaller than the pool of those you knew. It was one more reason the fare and service and the new face from the next valley mattered so. There was a way through for those who could pay a dispensation. The church could grant leave to marry within the forbidden degrees for a fee and good reason. But for poor village folk, the rule mostly just stood, quietly shaping who could love whom. A whole geometry of forbidden hearts, drawn in a world that already had so few to choose from. Let that strange wide web rest in your mind a moment, and loosen. So, when a couple meant to marry in the open and proper way, the first step was the banns. The banns were an announcement read aloud in the church 3 times, on 3 separate holy days, before the whole gathered village. The priest would stand and name them. That this man and this woman intended to marry, and that if any person knew of a reason why they could not lawfully wed, a hidden kinship, an older promise, a living spouse, they were bound before God to speak it now, or hold their peace forever. The purpose was plain and wise. It dragged the marriage out of the dark and into the open 3 times over, and gave the whole community its chance to stop a match that should not be. Those secret vows, those forbidden degrees, the banns were the net spread to catch them, and it gave the village its part to play. For 2 or 3 weeks, the coming marriage was public, named, real. People turned it over, as they turned everything over. The arithmetic was done aloud, at last. By the time the wedding day came, no one in the village could say they had not been told. There is something steadying in the picture. The dim church, the named couple standing while everyone looks, the old words read out. A private love made public, and so made safe, by being said 3 times in the light. For Edith and Hal, the banns were read through 3 quiet autumn Sundays. No one rose to forbid it. There was nothing to forbid. Let the bell ring softly in your mind and fade. And so to the wedding itself, which, for most of the Middle Ages, did not begin inside the church at all. It began at the church door. On the porch, in the open air, in full view of the village, the marriage was made before ever the couple stepped inside for the blessing. This is easy to forget and worth holding. The vows, the joining of hands, the giving of the ring, the words that made the marriage, all of it happened outside, on the threshold, where the whole world could witness it. Only afterward did the couple go in, to hear the nuptial mass at the altar. Picture the porch on the morning. The couple in their best, the priest in his vestments, the families pressed close, the village beyond. The cool stone, the open door behind them, with the dim church waiting, the grey sky or the thin sun above. And there, on the step between the world and the altar, the words are said. The priest asks them, each in turn, if they consent, freely, of their own will, and each says yes. The man takes the woman takes the man, by name, in the present tense, the very words the church had thought so long about, the words that made it real. There, in the doorway, before they had gone in at all. Then the ring, blessed and placed, touched first to the thumb, the Father, then 2 fingers, the Son and the Spirit, and slipped at last onto the 4th finger, where a vein was thought to run straight to the heart. An old belief, and a lovely one, and we keep the custom still without knowing why. Hold that image in the doorway, gentle and bright, as the night settles deeper around you. At the church door, among the vows, there was also a plainer business done, the matter of the dower. For a marriage joined 2 lives, but it also joined 2 purses, and the law made sure the woman was not left with nothing if she were left a widow. As he gave the ring, the man might also name what he endowed her with. A share of his goods, a right to a portion of his land for her life if he died first. With all my worldly goods I thee endow, the old words ran, and they were not only sentiment. They were a promise of bread should the worst come. This mattered enormously to a medieval woman. A widow, with her dower secured, had a place to stand, a roof, a means to live. A widow with nothing was thrown on the mercy of kin, or the parish, or the cold road. So the giving of the ring was also the giving of a kind of safety, witnessed and remembered. And the goods the bride brought, her dowry, her marriage portion, the linens and the pots and the cow and the coins her family had gathered for years. These too were known and counted, the foundation of the new household laid bare on the day. Love was said at the door, but the household was built of these plain and careful things. It is not the part the songs remember, Yet there is a deep kindness in it, under the dry talk of dower and portion. A whole society trying its clumsy best to make sure that two people, joining their small lives, would not be left to starve when one of them was gone. Even the arithmetic, in the end, was a kind of care. Let it rest softly with you. When the words were said at the door, and the ring given, and the dower named, then at last the couple passed inside, into the dim and the cool for the blessing. The nuptial mass, the holy part, the prayer over the new-made marriage. Inside, the church was a different world from the porch. Stone cold and quiet after the crowd, thick with the smell of incense and tallow and old prayer. The light falling, coloured and slow through the one good window onto the worn floor. The village hushed, the priest at the altar, the two of them kneeling, newly joined. There were old gestures woven through it. In some places, a carecloth, a veil, was held over the heads of the kneeling couple, a canopy of cloth between them and heaven while the blessing was said. The priest blessed them and prayed that they would grow old together and be fruitful and keep faith. And there was the kiss. The priest would give the kiss of peace to the groom and the groom to the bride. The blessing passed from the altar, hand to hand, mouth to mouth, out into the new marriage. A small, warm human thing, in all that cold stone and Latin. Then it was done. They rose, married in the eyes of God and the village and the law, and turned, and walked back down the dim nave toward the bright open door, and the day and the feast. Out of the cool quiet, into the noise and the warmth of everyone they knew. Let yourself drift in that hush a while before the doors open. There is no hurry to leave the cool dark. For all this careful order, people broke the rules constantly, and the church courts were busy. The records that survive are full of tangled marriages, the secret ones, the disputed ones, the half-made and the unmade. There were the clandestine marriages, made by the private words we spoke of, with no banns and no priest, valid but unwitnessed and ripe for trouble. A couple would marry in secret, against their families, and then have to prove it after. Or a jilted lover would claim a marriage that the other swore had never been. There were the cases of pre-contract. A man marries one woman in church, with bands and bells and all, and then a second woman comes forward, claiming he had promised himself to her first, in private, and if she could prove it, the church wedding was void, and the secret promise stood. Whole lives turned on what had been whispered in a barn a year before. The courts heard them with a kind of weary patience. Witnesses were called to swear what words they had heard, and when and where. Was it, "I will take you," which was only a promise of future marriage, or "I take you," which made it then and there? On such fine threads marriages hung. It tells us something tender, all this mess. That the rules were strict precisely because the human heart kept overrunning them. People loved where they should not, promised in the dark, changed their minds and got tangled. Exact people always have. The court rolls are a record of the heart misbehaving. Let that old familiar disorder drift past you and let it go. There was one more blessing, stranger to us and gentle, the blessing of the marriage bed. For the church did not only bless the vows and the mass. In many places, it blessed the very bed where the new husband and wife would lie down on their first night. The priest might come with holy water and a prayer to the chamber itself. He would bless the bed and the couple in it, asking God to keep them safe through the night, to bless their union, to drive off harm, and to grant them children in good time. Then he would withdraw and leave them to the dark. It can seem intrusive to us, the priest at the bedside. But think of it instead as the same care that ran through everything, the wish to gather even the most private moment of a life under the same wide blessing that covered the fields and the harvest and the dead in the churchyard. The bed itself, for the newlywed of the village, was nothing grand. A rope-strung frame, perhaps, if they were lucky, with a straw mattress and a bolster, heavy wool blankets. The cold of the cottage held off by the banked fire and each other. On that humble bed, blessed by a country priest, a new household truly began. And so the long road from a glance across the hay had reached its end and its beginning. The meeting, the courting, the tokens, the waiting, the banns, the door, the mass, the bed, all of it, to bring two ordinary people to a single dark chamber, married and home. Rest there with them in the blessed dark. The hardest part of the journey is behind. We have spoken of the holy part. Now, gently, the part the sermons did not. For under all the law and blessing ran the plain old current of desire, and the Middle Ages, for all their piety, were not nearly so prudish as we sometimes think. The medieval world talked about the body more frankly than the centuries that followed. Their stories were bawdy. Their songs were full of double meanings. The tales they told around the fire, the ones the monks disapproved of and copied down anyway, were often broad and earthy and very funny about love and lust and the muddle of the two. Marriage was understood to be for the body as well as the soul. The church taught that husband and wife owed each other what they called the marriage debt. The comforts of the bed due from each to the other, a duty, oddly, of pleasure given. A marriage unconsummated could even be undone. The body was not an afterthought. It was the seal. And outside marriage, of course, there was everything the rules tried to hold back. The courting that went too far. The harvest night warmth in the long grass. The children born too soon after a wedding, and the children born without one. The village counted and clucked and mostly carried on. People were people. We will not be coarse about it here in the dark. It is enough to know that they were not the grey, fearful, joyless folk of legend. They laughed at the body. They wanted as we want. They got into the same warm trouble. And then they got up at dawn and went out to the fields and said nothing. Let that human warmth move through the cold night and soften it. Let us listen for a little while to how they really talked of love in their songs and stories. Because the sermons survive, but so do the other things, and the other things tell us more about the ordinary heart than any sermon ever could. There were the love songs, tender and aching, of longing and parting, and the cruelty of a cold heart. A lover under a window in the May dawn, a maid mourning a sweetheart gone to the wars. The same sweet, sad shapes our own songs still take, set to tunes long lost, sung at the spinning and the harvest and the alehouse fire. But there were also the broad ones, the laughing ones, songs full of winks and innuendo, of millers and their wives, of priests who should know better, of clever maids and foolish men, and the endless comedy of who wanted whom. They were sung openly by everyone, and no one thought the worse of a good rude verse. And the tales were the same. The fireside stories, and later the ones written down by the great poets, were thick with bedroom tricks and mismatched lovers and old husbands fooled by young wives. The Middle Ages told dirty jokes, and told them well, and laughed at love's foolishness as we do. It is a warming thing to know, lying here in the dark, that on the long winter nights, in the smoky rooms, before the fire burned down, they did not only pray, they sang and laughed and teased the lovers among them. The same laughter about the same old foolishness 700 years ago. Let the imagined sound of it, low, warm, far off, carry you a little further towards sleep. But there was a colder shadow over love in the village, and we should not leave it out: the Lord. For most village folk were not free in the way we are. They were the Lord's tenants, even his property in part, and the Lord had a claim, of a kind, even on their marrying. In many manners, a tenant could not simply marry whom they liked, where they liked, freely. There was a fee to be paid, called merchet. When a daughter married, a payment to the Lord for the loss of her, and for his leave to let her go. A woman was, in the cold ledger of the manor, a worker whose marriage cost the estate something, and so the Lord's court kept watch on the marriages of the unfree. A girl who married without leave, or married a man off the manor, taking her labour away, might find her family fined, the payment squeezed from people who had little enough to give. The romance of the green ran straight into the account book of the hall. There were other fines, harder still. Lay-white, a fine laid on an unmarried woman who was found to have lain with a man, her private trouble turned into the Lord's small profit, written in the roll for all time. The most intimate things were not always allowed to stay private, or to stay free. It is the part that should temper any soft picture of it all, that these were people who did not fully own even their own loves and bodies, who paid the Lord for the right to marry and were fined for loving wrongly, and who, under all that weight, still loved and married and laughed and endured. That endurance is its own quiet wonder. Hold it gently as the fire sinks. Not all medieval love was young love. There were the widows, and the widowers, and their second springs. For death came early and often, and many who married would bury a husband or a wife, and many of those would, in time, marry again. Courtship was not only for the unwed young. A widow held a particular place in the village world. If her husband had left her a dower, land, a holding, she had something rare for a woman, a measure of her own standing, her own means, a say in her own next match. She might be the most independent woman in the whole parish, and so widows were courted with a different weight. A young man with no land of his own might look hard at a widow with a good holding, and a widow might take a younger husband for his strong back and his years of work ahead. The arithmetic ran both ways, and the widow, this time, often held the better end of it. There was a rough custom that sometimes greeted these matches, a clamour of pots and horns, and shouting outside the house of an ill-matched or hasty wedding, the village's loud, half-joking judgment on a union it found funny or improper. Even second love was the community's business, mocked or blessed as the village saw fit. But strip away the custom, and there is something tender underneath. A man and a woman, each having loved and lost once already, each knowing exactly what they were doing, choosing, with open eyes and tired hearts, to try the whole thing again. Not the dizzy first love of the green, but something quieter and braver and just as real. Let that gentle second chance drift through the dark with you. We should remember, too, how final it all was. For when a medieval couple married, by those words at the door, they married for life. There was no ending it. The Church allowed no divorce, in the sense we mean. The knot, once tied, held. A marriage could be declared null, shown never to have been valid, if there was a forbidden kinship, or an older pre-contract, or a lack of true consent. But that was to say, the marriage had never truly existed, not to dissolve a real one. A true marriage validly made, two could not undo, however bitterly they might wish it. This gave the choice an enormous weight. The person you joined hands with at the church door was the person you would lie beside until one of you died. Through every hard winter, every lost child, every quarrel, every long grey year, no second door to walk out of, only the one life shared to the end. It is sobering, and it shaped everything. It is why the families weighed so carefully, why the village watched so closely, why the courtship was so slow and so guarded. The stakes were a whole lifetime. You could not afford to be wrong, because being wrong had no remedy. And yet, knowing all that, they still married, still walked to the door, still said the words that could never be unsaid, still bound their one life to another's, on a glance across the hay and a season of hope. There is a kind of courage in that we have half forgotten, to choose, once for always. Let the weight and the wonder of it rest on you softly. We have heard so much of arithmetic and law that it is fair to ask, but was there love? Inside these careful, arranged, lifelong marriages, did the people in them love each other? The honest answer is that we cannot always know. The poor left few words about their hearts. We have the court rolls, the fines, the records of things gone wrong. The quiet, successful marriages, the ones that simply worked, left almost no trace at all. Happiness writes nothing down. It only lives, and ends, and is forgotten. But here and there, the love shows through. In the wills, where a dying man leaves all he has to my beloved wife, and trusts her over all others. In the letters of those who could write, full of plain tenderness and worry and missing. In the simple fact of couples who, having buried each other, ask to be buried side by side. And it stands to reason as well. Two people who shared one fire for 30 years, one bed, one table, one struggle against the cold, who raised children together and buried some of them together, and grew old at the same hearth. Something grew between them, surely even where it had not begun. The work made the love, in the end. Perhaps that is the deepest difference from our own time. We marry, often, because we are in love and hope the love will last the life. They married, often, for land and sense and family, and hoped the love would come. And often, in the long, slow grind of a shared life, it did. Let that quiet, late-arriving love settle over you, warm as a banked fire. Let us look in on our two once more, for the last time before the feast. The waiting is over for them. The cottage in the lane stands empty and ready. The harvest is in. And on 3 autumn Sundays, their banns have been read in the church. Picture Hal standing in the dim nave while the priest says his name, and Edith's. The whole village turned a little toward them, the old words asking if any knew a reason they should not wed. The silence after. The held breath, though there is nothing to fear. The slow letting go of it. And Edith, on those same Sundays, among the women, hearing her own name read out, hearing her courtship, her long patient season of glances and gloves and walks, made public and holy at last, named before God and everyone she has ever known. There is no going back now, and she does not want to go back. The arithmetic and the heart have met. A small fee was paid to the Lord, for she is his tenant's daughter, and her leaving costs the manor. The merchant grumbled over, found, handed across, the cold ledger satisfied. And with that paid, and the banns read, and the door waiting, there is nothing left between them and the morning. So we leave them on the night before the wedding. Edith in her father's house, her marriage portion laid ready, her hands quiet for once. Hal in his, lying awake in the dark, listening to the same rain on the same thatch. 200 souls asleep around them, and 2 of them awake, and almost arrived. Rest with them. There is a particular stillness to the night before a wedding, and it has not changed in 700 years. The lying awake, the turning over, the strange mix of certainty and fear, the long-wanted thing suddenly so close it can hardly be believed. In the dark cottage, the bride-to-be lies among her gathered things, the linens she has spun and woven through years of evenings, the pot, the cloth, the small store of coins, a new life folded and counted and waiting in the corner of the only home she has ever known. Tomorrow she will carry it down the lane to a different door and stay. She thinks, perhaps, of her mother asleep across the room, who made this same walk once, of the cottage waiting, cold and empty now, that she will make warm, of the man who will be there, whom she has known all her life and is only now truly choosing. The fear and the gladness, braided so tight she cannot tell them apart. And across the village, the groom lies awake in his own dark, thinking his own version of it. Whether he is ready, whether he can keep the household he is taking on. The strange new word, husband, trying it against himself in the silence. Then, at last, sleep takes them both on their separate sides of the sleeping village. The rain eases. The fires are grey ash. The church tower stands black and patient against the stars, waiting, as it has waited for 100 couples, to open its door in the morning. Let them sleep. Let the long waiting end in rest. And let your own thoughts go as quiet and dark as the village around them. And so the morning comes, grey and soft, the day of the wedding. There is no rush in it the way we rush such days now. It begins like any other, fires lit, animals fed, and then, slowly, the whole village begins to turn toward the church. The bride is made ready in her father's house. Not in white, that came much later, but in her very best, whatever she had. A good gown of russet or blue or green, her hair perhaps loose for the last time as a maid, a garland of flowers or herbs if the season gave them, set on her head by the women. The groom comes for her, or meets her on the way, with his own people about him. And then the procession forms the two families, the friends, the neighbours, walking together through the lanes toward the church, with music if there was a piper, with laughter and calling, the whole community moving as one body toward the door. There were old customs scattered through the morning. Children might string a rope or a garland across the lane, to be paid a coin to let the couple pass. Wheat might be ready to throw for plenty and children. Bells, if the church had them, beginning to ring. The whole village given over for one day to two of its own. Picture the procession winding through the grey morning toward the squat stone tower. The music thin and bright in the cold air. The bride in her garland. The crowd warm around them. A whole world walking a single couple to their door. Let that gentle gathering carry you, slow and warm, toward the feast. They reach the church, and there, on the porch, in the open morning, it is done. We have stood here before, in the telling. Now let us stand here for our two, and watch the words said. The priest meets them at the door. The families press close. The village fills the yard behind. The old questions are asked. Is there any impediment? Has anyone come to forbid it? And the autumn silence answers, broken only by a child, a bird, the wind in the yews. Then the consent, each in turn, in the present tense, freely given. Hal takes Edith. Edith takes Hal. By name in the words the church had thought so long about. The words that, the moment they are spoken, make a marriage no power can unmake. There, on the cold step, between the world and the altar, in front of everyone they have ever known, the ring is blessed and given. Touched to the thumb, the first finger, the second, and slipped onto the third, the finger, with the vein that runs, they believed, straight to the heart. With this ring I thee wed. Her hand in his, the cold metal warming between them. And it is finished, the great slow thing, in a moment. The glance across the hay, the gloves, the bent coin, the walks, the waiting, the banns, all of it gathered up and spent in a few words on a church porch on an autumn morning. They are married. The village breathes out and smiles, and the bells, if there are bells, ring. Let them ring softly, far off, fading, as you settle deeper into the dark. When the mass was sung and the couple came out into the day, then came the part the village loved best, the feast, the wedding feast, the bride ale, the great gathering of food and drink and music that turned a holy morning into a long warm day to remember through the winter. It was held wherever there was room, a barn swept clean, the manor's hall if the Lord was kind, the open green itself if the weather held. Trestle tables set up, benches crowded, the best the families could afford laid out, meat, which the poor tasted rarely, and white bread, and above all ale, brewed strong for the day. The bride ale gave us the word. Ale was brewed specially, and sold or shared, sometimes to raise a little money for the new couple, and the drinking of it was the heart of the celebration. The whole village toasting the two of them. The fire built high, the cups going round, the room growing warm and loud and golden. And there was music and dancing, the same round dances of the green, but for one couple's sake. The bride danced with everyone. The old told stories. The young eyed each other, for a wedding was the greatest courting ground of all, and one match often kindled the next. The wheel turning on, even here, even now. It might go on long into the night, the noise and the warmth and the firelight. Let it. There is nowhere any of them need to be tomorrow that they cannot face a little tired. The feast is the village's gift to its own, a single bright loud day in a hard and quiet year. Let the warm noise of it wash over you and grow soft and begin to fade. As the feast wore down and the night came on, there was one last custom, and it embarrassed no one then. The bedding. For the marriage was not held truly complete until the couple had lain together. And the village, in its broad good humour, liked to see them safely to the door of it. The guests, warm with ale, would escort the couple to their chamber. There was laughter and ribald jokes and good wishes that were not always delicate, the whole crowd in high spirits seeing the bride and groom off to their marriage bed. We would find it mortifying. They found it only natural and funny and right. The bed, as we said, was often blessed by the priest with holy water and a prayer for the night. And there were small customs. A posset of warm spiced drink left for the couple, a throwing of the bride's stocking, a last toast at the bedside before the company withdrew. Then, at last, the door was shut, the noise left outside, and the two were alone. Alone, very likely, for almost the first time in their whole long courtship. After all the watching, all the lanes that were never empty, all the village always near, the door shut, the latch dropped, and a silence that was theirs and no one else's. The fire banked low, the blessed bed, the cold cottage held off by wool and each other. We will leave them there, of course, at the closing of the door. It is enough to know the long road ended in a small, warm, dark room, and a marriage begun. The village quiet at last outside, the feast fires sinking, the stars hard and bright over the thatch. Let the door close gently in your mind, and the quiet come down. The morning after a wedding was, in the end, only a morning. And there is something deeply restful in how quickly the extraordinary folded back into the ordinary, and life simply went on. The new wife rose in her new home and lit her own fire for the first time. In the cottage that had been an old man's, that had stood empty waiting, that was now hers to keep warm and hers to make a life in. The same work as ever, but done now as a wife in a house with her own name on the rent. The new husband went out to the same fields he had always worked. But he went out a married man, a householder, a man with a place of his own at last. The long waiting of his youth finally behind him. The village saw him pass, and nodded, and counted him, now, among the men. There was no journey away, no honeymoon, as we would know it. There was the cottage, and the fields, and the byre, and the lane, and the church, the same small world as before, only entered now through a different door. The wedding was a single day. The marriage was all the days that came after. And so the great event sank back into the slow wheel of the year. The harvest done, the wedding done, the winter coming, the work going on. Two lives that had run alongside each other, now running as one into all the grey and gold ordinary days ahead. Let that gentle settling back into the everyday carry you further down towards sleep. Let us draw back now and see the whole of it at once, the way you can only see a life when it is over. That first glance across the cut hay on a gold summer evening years ago, and everything that grew from it, slow as a tree, the seasons of courting, the fairings and the gloves, the walks in the dusk, the long waiting for the land and the cottage, the banns read out on 3 autumn Sundays, the words on the church porch, the feast, the bedding, the morning after, and then the years, the children, the harvests, the hard winters weathered side by side. It was not a grand romance. No one wrote it down, no poet sang it. It happened in a place with no name, to people history forgot. It was only two ordinary souls finding each other in a small green world and making a life. And it was, in its quiet way, the most important thing that ever happened to either of them. This was the truth of medieval dating, under all the custom and law and arithmetic. Not so different, in the end, from our own. The same long-looking, the same hope, the same brave, foolish choice to bind one life to another and trust it would hold. Only slower, only watched, only lit by firelight, and bounded by fields and final. 700 years gone, and the green grown over, and the cottage long fallen to grass. But the glance across this hay still happens. Somewhere, tonight, in some form, as it always will. That, perhaps, is the only thing that never changes. Rest in that long, warm certainty as the night draws all the way down. The wedding day is long over now, in our telling, and the village has gone to sleep. Let us walk through it once more, quietly, the way we walked into it hours ago, and see it settled and dark and at peace. The new couple's cottage stands among the others, its fire banked, its door shut, its two sleepers within. No different from the outside than any other low thatched house in the lane. Only they know what has changed inside it. Only they, and the whole village that helped it happen. The other houses stand dark around it. The old man who courted with a carved spoon 50 years ago, asleep beside the woman he gave it to. The young ones, still only looking, dreaming of glances and gloves of their own. The widow, with her good holding, the servants under their borrowed roofs, all of them asleep. The fields lie pale and empty under the stars. The harvest gathered, the year turning down toward winter. The stream runs low and quiet in the dark. The wood stands black at the edge of the world, and over it all, the squat church tower, where so many vows were said, keeps its long watch. It is the same village we entered at dusk, when the fires were just being lit. Only now the night is deep and everyone is sleeping, and the whole slow story has been told. 200 souls and all their loves gathered safe under the dark and the thatch. Let it hold you too now as gently as it holds them. Before we let the night close over, a thought for all the ones we could not name. For Edith and Hal are made up, of course, two faces lent to a true and ancient story. But behind them stand the real ones, in their countless thousands who actually lived it. Every one of them met someone once, in a field, or a churchyard, or a fair. Every one of them felt the lift in the chest, gave or received some small worn token, walked out in the dusk, waited, hoped, and either won the long slow thing or lost it. And almost none of them left us their names, or their faces, or a single word of how it felt. They are the great, silent crowd behind all history. The ones who did not rule or fight or write, but only lived, loved, married, laboured, died, and lie now in the unmarked ground of 1,000 forgotten churchyards. The whole human race, very nearly. is made of people exactly like them. And yet the feeling they felt is not lost, because we still feel it. The glance still lands. The heart still lifts. The long hope still aches and waits. We carry their courtships in our own, without knowing it, every one of us. That is a kind of immortality, perhaps, the only kind most of us will ever have. So tonight, as you drift off, you might spare them a soft and passing thought. All the nameless lovers of the Middle Ages, asleep now for 700 years. They would not have minded being remembered, just for a moment, in the dark. And then let even that thought go, and follow them down towards sleep. The fire is almost out now, in the cottage, in the village, in the whole grey-green country. The light has sunk to embers. There is nothing left burning but the last red heart of the hearth, and even that is fading. The wind has dropped. The rain that fell on the thatch is long stopped, and only a slow drip comes now from the eaves, spaced wide and soft, like a clock running down. The animals are still in the byre. The mice are quiet in the straw. The owl has gone silent in the wood. The whole world is doing now what you are doing. Letting go, going still, sinking down past thought toward the dark, warm floor of sleep. The newly married, the long married, the still only looking, the old, the alone, all of them. There is nothing more to do tonight. The harvest is in. The vows are said. The story is told to its end. Every door in the village is shut, and every fire is banked, and every soul is at rest. Let your breathing go slow and deep. Let the last of the day's weight slide off your shoulders into the dark. There is nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to carry. Only the warm dark, and the quiet, and the slow turning of a night 700 years ago. That is somehow also this one. Think of the embers, if you are still here with me. The way a banked fire holds its warmth all night under a soft grey blanket of ash, not burning, not cold, only quietly keeping, until the morning comes to wake it. That is what a sleeping village was. A few hundred banked fires, a few hundred warm dark rooms, all the loves and labours of the day covered over with sleep, and held, and kept safe until the light returned. And that is what you are now. The day banked down, the cares covered over, the warmth kept quietly under the dark. Nothing asked of you, nothing burning, only the slow, safe keeping of the night. You do not have to follow my voice any more. You do not have to hold the story, or the names, or any of it. Let it all sink down into the ash with everything else, and grow dim, and be kept. The archive will keep the rest. That is what it is for. Every glance and glove and vow and feast, written down, kept safe, waiting, so that you do not have to hold any of it, and can simply let go and rest. If you are still awake, that is perfectly all right. There is no test at the end of this, no place you have failed to reach. Some nights sleep comes early, and some nights it comes late, and both are fine. Just keep lying still in the warm dark. Let the village stay around you, dim and safe and quiet. The thatch, the embers, the stars. You can stay in it as long as you like. It is in no hurry to fade. Let your thoughts come loose and drift, the way the smoke drifted up from the thatch. Wherever they go, let them go. Do not follow, do not hold. Each one rising and thinning and gone into the dark. The bodies in the village beds are heavy now with sleep. Let yours grow heavy too. The pillows soft, the blankets warm, the dark kind, sinking slowly the way they sank into the deep quiet floor of the night. The fire is only ash now, with one faint coal at its heart, going slowly out. Soon even that will dim, and the cottage will be dark, and the village will be dark, and the only light left in all the country will be the cold, far light of the stars. It is the deepest, quietest hour of the night. The hour when even the wakeful sleep at last, when the watch nods at his post, when the whole turning world seems to pause and hold its breath and rest. There is nothing left of the story but its warmth. The people are asleep, the fires are out, the night has taken everything gently into itself. And you are nearly there now, too, at the soft edge of sleep, where the words stop mattering. Let them stop. Let my voice grow small and far, like a light in a window seen from across the fields. Still there, still warm, but no longer something you need to reach. Rest now. The village rests. The archive rests. The long night holds you and keeps you and asks nothing. You are safe in the warm dark, 700 years from anywhere and home. And so the night goes on, as it has for centuries. The fires burn down, the village asleep, the vows long said and the feast long over, and perhaps, by now, so are you. If you are still awake, that is perfectly fine. There is nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to do. The story will keep. It has kept for 700 years. It will keep until morning. Thank you for spending this night in the archive, for letting these long-gone lovers and their small green world keep you company a while in the dark. The archive will be here tomorrow night, as always, with another quiet story and another low fire, and all the time in the world. Until then, rest well, breathe slow, let the dark be kind. Sleep well.